So tons. Okay, got it. Thank you for the consent to this being recorded. Tansi Amboastich Oki Dadanastara. Bonjour and hello. Thank you so much for each and every one of you for being here and making space in your heart, in your mind, and of course in your timetable to be here this morning. I'm calling from Treaty 7 territory, south of you if you're in Maskwacis, southwest, I suppose. And this land, as you see in the photo here, is a storied place. You can feel invited by that pathway wandering up the mountains. At this elevation right now in the Rocky Mountains, those golden flowers, the brown-eyed Susans, are beginning to bloom. Lots of wildflowers are cropping up. And we've had these incredible thunderstorms coming through in the afternoons. My thoughts go out to the forest firefighters as well, because we've been experiencing smoke here and ash the past couple of days. So if you or anyone you know, or the communities you know are living in are affected by the wildfires, my deepest thoughts and my heart goes out to you. This land in colonial terms is known as Treaty 7 territory. Treaty 7 was signed in 1877. And our neighbors and, my dear friends, the closest neighbors that I have had the fortune of growing a relationship are the Treaty 7 signatories, the Iahe Nakota. And they're comprised of 3 bands, the Goodstoney, the Bear's Paw, and the Chiniki bands. Also Treaty 7 territory signatories are the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, and of course Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So these are what we know in colonial terms. This place of the Bow Valley and in Iethka is known as Ijathibe Othmunga, and these are nuances of language that I'm just coming to know now. I'm here today to share my presentation called In Our Nature: Creative Practices to Decolonize Pedagogies, Connect with Self, and Embrace Authenticity. I'm here as a humble and vulnerable human. I don't know everything. I certainly know a lot, and I am excited to share this with you, but I think part of this decolonizing practice is constantly remaining humble to the practice and humble to the process, which comes with a lot of vulnerability. So you listening to me right now is a way of me being vulnerable with you. So thank you for holding this space together. I kind of imagine us, if these screens didn't exist, we'd all be in a field together. We would probably have a nice blanket laid out underneath us. Our squishy bums would be, maybe poking through at the grass, and there would be birdsong. The wind would be rustling in our hair, and we would all be sitting and contributing our own body presence to being in circle with one another. I remember a few years ago listening to Dr. Sean Lessard present online, and his presentation, the thing that stuck with me the most, he's like, why do we have students in class sitting in rows and desks? He's like, put the desk to a side, let's all sit in circle together. So if we can imagine Dr. Sean Lessard's advice, taking that to heart and sitting in circle, if we can imagine that together today. I am in my working mode, which this work and my research informs, is with the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley. I encourage you to look us up, biospherinstitute.org. We're based in what is colonial known as Canmore, otherwise in Iethka language known as Cha Upchichien Kudebi. And I recently completed my Master's of Environmental Education and Communication through Royal Roads University. And that's really where I was able to sink in and dig my teeth into what this decolonization, what this placing ourselves might mean in today's world. It's something that, the more that I think about, the deeper and more learning that comes out of it. There's 3 themes that I'll be working with today, and and in my learning and ongoing learning and continuous learning, I can kind of keep coming back to these concepts of respect, reciprocity, and relationships. Before I go any further, I'm going to just read briefly from Robin Wall-Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. I have stacks of books lined up beside me, and it's something that at the Take Me Outside conference in May of 2023, this year in Banff, I remember Monique Gray Smith, the recent author and adapter of Braiding Sweetgrass into the youth version. She reminded me to raise those voices up, raise the Indigenous voices up in your practice. So in my work as an environmental educator, I'm constantly striving to raise the voices of important perspectives that have gone unnoticed, have gone completely erased. And in doing so, I'd like to raise the voice of Robin Wall-Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass. This passage is from the first chapter, The Gift of Strawberries. Lewis Hyde wonderfully illustrates this dissonance in his explanation of, quote, the Indian giver. This expression, used negatively today as a pejorative for someone who gives something and then wants to have it back, actually derives from a fascinating cross-cultural misinterpretation between Indigenous culture operating in a gift economy and a colonial culture predicated on the concept of private property. When gifts were given to the settlers by the native inhabitants, their recipients understood that they were valuable and were intended to be retained. Giving them away would have been an affront, but the Indigenous people understood the value of the gift to be based in reciprocity and would be affronted if the gifts did not circulate back to them. Many of our ancient teachings counsel that whatever we have been given is supposed to be given away again. So knowing that today is a gift, that your presence here today is a gift, and that our learning together is truly a gift, may we keep on giving in this gift economy, as Robin Wall-Kimmerer explains. Oh, one slide too soon. Going forward, I'd also just like in this respect space, I'd like to open up the space. Are there any elders or knowledge keepers that I should be aware of in the audience today? If so, please know that I am of utmost gratitude that you've attended this session in the first place, and I'd like to leave the floor open if there's anything that needs to be said before I proceed. I'll just take a drink of water and a breath if there's space for that. All right, and I think I'm okay to proceed. But if anything comes up throughout the discussion or presentation, again, the chat is open. I have my eyes on it here. Welcome Maribel, welcome Sarah, welcome Gail and Joey, Cassandra, Manisha, Shannon, welcome Tanya, Ariana, thank you for being here, Mitch. And myself, before I proceed, I'd like to invite my ancestors into this presentation as well. My lineage comes from Eastern Canada, or what is colonially known as Canada, for 2 generations on my mother's side, from the Guthrie and Carson families, and on my father's side, from the Widmer family and Rick family from Switzerland and from Germany. So those are kind of the lenses through which I approach this presentation today. And when I see those words, respect, reciprocity, relationships, my relationships to this place, my relationships to my family lineage, and my evolving relationships, I sometimes get a little bit furrowed in my eyebrows, like, oh, these are deep and important concepts. And before I know it, I've completely forgotten, the lightness, the laughter, the playfulness, the creativity that really breathes light into these relationships, into the concepts of respect, into being in reciprocity with Indigenous culture and with the land. It's very easy for myself, with these wanting to do well principles in my head and wanting to go about this in a good way, to misinterpret that as pressure, as responsibility in a negative way. So it's maybe this next slide is more a reminder for myself more than anything, but I thought I'd share it with you that along with discovering what's truly in our collective nature as earthlings here sharing this walk on earth together, is respect, reciprocity, and relationships, but is also creativity and playfulness and curiosity. So throughout my presentation, I hope to weave those concepts in as well. How did I get here? How did I come to talking about these things? About decolonizing our practices, about learning Indigenous ways of knowing. That last slide that I had curiosity in there, that is, I think, an untapped potential, and how I ended up asking these questions. Why did I come into this relationship to place? Why didn't I learn about these stories growing up at Banff Elementary School, at Banff High School? Like, I had incredible teachers growing up, and I remember asking them, my grade 10 teacher, English teacher in particular, an amazing teacher, so enthusiastic, had this depth of knowledge about all things Shakespeare. And I asked her, I said, well, why aren't we learning about, the people that were here before us and before them and before them? And because I'm, a little bit of a pokey thinker and a curious thinker, she responded very patiently and said, well, this will better prepare you for university. And that was the answer that I sat with and I lived with for quite a while, until I went to university and I found Royal Roads. And it was this whole, paradigm shift of, wait a second, we've had some deeply suppressed and awful treatment of Indigenous voices. And it's not to revisit the past and to redo it, but there is a melding together and a weaving together of taking that colonial lens that I've grown up with, and that informs a lot of how I come to know the world, deconstructing it, unlearning, and filling it, that space with respect, with reciprocity, and with relationships. And unfortunately, or fortunately, there's space for this to happen, but it's not happening enough. Just 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in a classroom at Notre-Dame-des-Monts School, and a teacher approached me and a little bit nervous about the curriculum that was coming up in the following year. And she said to me, I see this in my curriculum. I just have a screenshot here of the Learn Alberta website and the curriculum outcomes for grade 3. And I'm intimidated. I don't know where to start. She wants to go about it a good way. She sees First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, knowledge is supposed to be an outcome that she imparts to her students. She's, supposed to be connecting them with teepees, igloos, medicines, clothing, transportation, but feels completely overwhelmed and intimidated by this concept. And this is not a common or an uncommon sentiment from teachers that I work with. As an environmental educator, my job is to not only empower teachers to connect their curriculum to the natural world, but to also do so in a way that is raising the voices of Indigenous people. And it's one thing to raise a book and to give a resource out, but it's a whole other concept, and that's really where the depth of my work is going, is to understand that this teacher is not alone in her thoughts, that despite the efforts of incredible organizations of walking together, for example, Education for Reconciliation, I commend their work, but it takes time, and it takes a really deep reflection to understand and to rather remember that we are not humans on the earth, like this dancing human on the earth on the side there. We are humans of the earth. That's a huge paradigm shift to understanding that this is not information that we're just passing through us or passing forward, that we're raising the voices of those whose voice can't be heard. And when we know that we're humans of the earth, that we belong in this story, that we belong in our mutual walk on earth, as I was mentioning before, or with the earth, then that's a much more inviting place to stay or to teach from. If we're teaching as a human of the earth, then we're teaching on behalf of the, maybe I'll go to the next slide here. We're teaching on behalf of that 95% of us that's made up of Douglas fir, of pine, of spruce, of ocean water, of wherever the landscapes are that are informing who you are. Yes, there's the 5% of us that's made up of bones and ligaments and blood and tears, but there's that 95% of us that's been informed of energy that's recirculating through our ecosystems again and again and again since for billions of years. As Joanna Macy likes to put it, act your age, all 4.6 billion years of it, to understand that those places and are much more than the confines of our identity, rather, is much more than the confines within our skin. And when we think back to that teacher who's, and myself included, has absolutely felt this, overwhelm of how am I supposed to teach Indigenous knowledge without being an Indigenous person myself? And I took comfort in this quote from Marie Wilson, a Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner, and saying that sitting in corners, wringing your hands, and wondering what to do is not going to advance anything, including yourself. Read the calls to action, and as you go through them, one at a time, ask yourself, do I belong in this call? And while I'm not going to read through the whole Truth and Reconciliation Commission today, I do highly recommend that you do so yourself if you haven't already. I try whenever possible to connect my work in education with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and just know that those were informed by generations of trauma, of ways that we can go better together. And again, that pity, that guilt, and that sitting in the corner wringing our hands is not going to do anyone any good, including yourself. So let's allow ourselves patience to be okay with not going forward in a way that we always know. We kind of have to let ourselves unfold into the unknowing here and be vulnerable in that. So today's presentation is about trying to scratch at the surface as to what is that 90% of you made up in there? What is that 95% of Sarah or Maribel or Joey or Gail? Who is that 95% that's informed who you are? As I said before, I'm not here to just give you a list of tick boxes and say I'm decolonizing myself and practices. These are certainly great gestures and great ways to go forward, but it's not the deep internal work that's represented here. These are great actions, and I highly encourage you to do so. I'm happy to share these slides later. These are practices that, most of which, I would say all of them, aside from writing a letter to a local nation or band, I've engaged in. But the one that we often overlook, and the one that I'd like to raise out today, is oh, what's happening? Oh, it's taking me away from a site. Suspense is building. The one that I'd like to raise out today is to sit and listen. And sitting and listening, what a simple concept. Sitting and listening with a place. And when we think decolonizing practices, we might think that it has to be this elaborate practice. But truly, if you take anything away from this presentation today, please, I invite you to make time and space in your day, in your lives, in our busy hustle and bustle, to just sit with a place outdoors, a place that's sacred to you, and listen and see what comes up. If I can invite you now to find a piece of paper, because that playfulness and that creativity that I so dearly love is going to come out now. So please find a piece of paper. I'll give you a few moments to do so, and a writing utensil of any sort. Your piece of paper essentially just has to have space enough for your hand to fit on top of. You're going to be tracing your hand over it in a moment. So once you have your piece of paper set on the desk in front of you, I invite you to put your dominant hand, so I write with my right hand, and then place that on your sheet of paper. Likewise, if you write with your left hand primarily, you can put that left hand on your piece of paper. And with your non-dominant hand, you're going to take your pen or pencil, whatever you have, and just trace the outline of your hand. Trace the outline of your hand. And I didn't take my own notes. I didn't bring a piece of paper. One moment. Right, and once you have that outline on your piece of paper, I'd like you to close your eyes. You can put your pen down. And we'll just take a moment to take one long as possible inhale through your nose. Let your belly go soft. Let your shoulders drop. And out through your mouth. And come into breath with the universe. In through your nose. Feel that oxygen nourishing your body, and exhaling all the carbon dioxide that's going to nourish the trees or the plants around you. And once you've taken a few breaths, I'd like you to think of a time when you were in the natural world somewhere and you felt truly alive. Not alive might be truly at peace. That alive to you might be zinging with energy. That alive to you might just be simply being. And when you have a memory, and take some time to really feel what it was like in that memory of a time where you felt truly alive in nature. Think of what it felt like, what you were seeing, what you were hearing there. And I'd like you to think of one word to describe what you were feeling. When you can think of one word to describe what you're feeling, I'd like you to write it in the thumb position of your hand. So this is going to be an adjective, a word that describes something. You can write that in the thumb position of your hand. Once you have that word, I'd like you to think of one word to describe what you were seeing. You can write that in the index finger, the pointer finger part of your hand. And this word, the seeing word, it should be a noun. So this should be a person, a place, or a thing. So your first word you're feeling is an adjective. The second word is a noun. Bear with me, this will make sense in a moment. All right, and when you have the noun to describe what you are seeing, the third word, the doing word, as you can guess, is a verb. So write your verb word in your middle finger to describe the space of your middle finger to describe what you're doing in this memory of yours. So connected to that same memory, what you're feeling, what you're seeing, what you're doing as a verb. And the next word is a word to describe, if you think to that memory, whether you're sitting by a creek, for example, a word to describe the village of people in your life. So the humans in your life at that point in time, whether it was this morning or whether this was a memory from 10 years ago, who were the people in your life at that time? And please use an adjective to describe those people and put that word in your ring finger, your fourth finger, an adjective to describe them. And last of all, we'll, in our pinky finger here, we'll do a landscape. So this is again another noun, a person, place, or thing. And a landscape, a river, a tundra, a field, a mountain, rolling hills, bubbling creek, whatever it might be, a noun that describes the landscape in which you're immersed in this memory. And that can go in your pinky spot at the end there. And I don't see anything coming up in the chat, so I'm guessing you're all with me on this. You're doing great. And we're going to fill in the blanks of our Mad Lib eco-identity poetry here. So using the word that you had to describe what you're feeling, you're going to fill in the blanks for the thumb. Using the word to describe the what you're seeing, you're going to put the noun, the index finger, in the second space there. And then the third space is the action word. The fourth space is the adjective to describe the humans in your life, your village. And that fifth space, the pinky space, is to provide a noun for the landscape in which you're immersed. Oops. How do we go back to that? There we go. All right. And if you have a sentence that hopefully makes no sense, but brings a smile to your face and you know the meaning of it, or it means something to you, I invite you to put it in the chat, and we'll see what we come up with here. Happy forest, play, fun, and meadow. So Maribel, if I may, I'll put that into the format for us here. Like a happy forest who is playing, I am a fun meadow. So that's from Maribel. Yeah. Like a vitalized, tall, strong tree who is hiking, I am a loving friend and family member, woods in the mountains. Beautiful, Gail. Thank you for sharing. Tanya, like a humbling vastness who is walking, I am a co-carrying mountain valley. Phenomenal. I have chills. Who knew? Such poets amongst us. Another Heidi. Great to see you. Like a joyful sparkle who is paddling, I am a wise river. Woohoo! That is profound. Tammy, like a content tidal pool who is observing, I am a trustworthy ocean shore. Amazing. Like a connection water who is swimming, I am an energetic rolling desert hill. Carolyn, beautiful. Like a piece of nature who is relaxing. I love how you spelled peace there. I am a comforting waterfall. I am a joyful person who is dancing, a friend in the river valley. Thank you for sharing, Joey. Beautiful. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I have a big smile on my face as I'm reading through those. This is a concept, a word jumble, as whatever you'd like to call it. I call it eco-identity poetry, because it truly sounds like we have poets in the room. Whether or not you self-identified as a poet. And it brings again that playfulness, that coming into knowing ourselves as an expression of the earth, and thinking through a lens and through an identity that is representing and speaking on behalf of those. I have to go back to the chat here to read those through. Speaking on behalf of that kin sky, of that dancing river valley, of that comforting waterfall, of that energetic rolling desert hill. Those are the places that are informing who you are. So that we realize that we're not just confined to this epidermis within us, that we are speaking on behalf of all of these places and all of these humans and more than humans that inform us. Thank you so much I'll give you some poetry snaps for all of the great sharing here. I will circulate these slides. I invite you to use this exercise in whatever way and context that you have. I came up with this. This is an ode, a shout out to COVID, pandemic times. I was in lockdown. My partner had COVID, needed to move out of the house, and I was confined to the house for 2 weeks, racking my brain as to how to present online in a way that was not totally boring, and this is what came of it. So thanks for indulging. To lean into the Indigenous leaders in the world, one of whom I consider is Tyson Yunkaporta. His beautiful book, Sand Talk: How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World. If you haven't read it already, I highly encourage you to do so. He reminds us that if people are laughing, they are learning. True learning is a joy because it is an act of creation. So if this brought a smile to your face, maybe a chuckle, know that we're learning together and learning ourselves in a new way. Much of the work that is presented today here is informed in a great role model of mine, Joanna Macy, author of Active Hope, author of the whole concept of, where do I have my book here? Coming back to life. These are practices that are this book itself is chock full of workshop ideas and practices that we can integrate into our professional lives, whether you're an educator, whether you're a student, whether you're just a curious human who wants to go forward in a good way. I highly recommend leaning into Joanna Macy's writing and resources. And as the work that reconnects informs us, if the world is to be healed through human efforts, I am convinced it will be by ordinary people like us, people whose love for this life is even greater than their fear, people who can be open to the web of life that called us into being. So with that, thank you for your attention today. I enjoyed exploring these kind of terrains of respect, relationships, and reciprocity, having a little fun, hopefully along the way. And I encourage you to go forward and make time for yourself in these busy times. It's so easy. Why is it so easy to be busy in a colonial world? It's intentional. It's to leave us with a feeling of emptiness. But when we slow down, when we sit with place, when we express our gratitude, that's a feeling of fullness. So I encourage you this summer to find a moment of stillness. Bring a journal along. This is a friend of mine looking out from Icefall Lodge doing some painting. I love bringing a journal along and letting the journal be a way of me making sense of what I'm seeing and hearing and listening. And again, as an act of decolonizing my practice, I often cite and continue to cite works that I've referenced. I'll send out these slides if that's appropriate. I'll be in touch with Manisha if that's called upon. If you feel comfortable doing so, I encourage you to put your email in the chat. I'm always open to connecting with people, and I'm building out Future Leaders as an environmental education program of the Biosphere Institute. I'm building out our network throughout the province, so you're calling in from all over. So if you put your email in the chat box, I'd love to connect with you in person. And if you'd rather it go the other way around, my email is education@biosphereinstitute.org. Screenshot this and reach out if it feels right. I think we have a little bit of time for any questions, comments, what's resonating for you. Yeah, I welcome you to turn on your mic, turn on your camera if you feel comfortable. How are you, Manisha?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I
Beautiful
love
to see your
I
smile
like
face.
everyone is so creative. Like looks like everyone is a poetry writer, like Wise River. Like
Yeah.
it's so beautiful.
Mm.
So I'd like to suggest one thing I learned today. If Gail, if we are able to unmute and share, or um, um, Mitch, who would like to start, and then you pass it to the next person. What did you like best? What touched you? What did you learn in this session, please? Yeah, go ahead, Gail. If you can speak, that would be great.
And you can see me. One moment.